My family gave my son's inheritance away. Not because they were cruel, not in the way you'd think. They did it with sensible nods and quiet, reasonable voices, all while looking right through my child. They gave it to his cousin, the son of my successful brother, because it was the practical thing to do. My son, you see, has autism, and in their world, that meant he wasn't a worthy heir to a legacy of sawdust and sea salt. So, I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I waited until the dead of night, and I took back something they didn't even know was valuable. And in doing so, I didn't just reclaim a birthright. I torched the bridge to a family that never truly saw us anyway. My name is Elara, and for most of my life, I've been the family's resident dreamer. That's the polite term. The less polite ones were the artist, the sensitive one, or my brother's favorite, the one who needs to get a real job. I'm a freelance illustrator, which in my family's language is one step up from professional street mime. I live in a small rented cottage in the same coastal New England town where generations of my family have lived and died. It's a town that smells of low tide and old money, a place where your last name is a story everyone already knows. And then there's my son, Leo. He's 14. He has his grandfather's eyes, the color of the ocean, just before a storm, and a mind that works in ways that are both breathtaking and, to my family, baffling. Leo is on the autism spectrum. He's not a collection of deficits and challenges, though that's all my family seems to see. He is a universe of intense, beautiful focus. He can spend 8 hours sketching the intricate joint system of a 19th century cabinet without noticing time has passed. He doesn't do small talk. He does deep dives. His love isn't expressed in casual hugs. It's expressed in the silent offering of a perfectly sanded piece of driftwood, its grain brought to life because he knew I'd find it beautiful. Our family is small, a tight little knot of expectations. There are my parents, who value stability and appearances above all else. Then there's my older brother, Marcus, the golden son. He's a partner at a finance firm in Boston. He has the perfect wife, Chloe, the perfect 2 children, and the perfect 3-car garage. They are the living embodiment of the American dream my parents always wanted. Marcus is a good man, I suppose, if your definition of good is successful and predictable. He doesn't understand me, and he really doesn't understand Leo. To him, Leo is a problem to be managed, a puzzle with missing pieces. He'll ask me, in a lowered, concerned voice at family gatherings, "Have you tried that new behavioral therapy? I read an article." He never asks what Leo is passionate about. He never asks what makes him light up. The center of our family mythology, the thing that bound us all together, wasn't a person. It was a place. My grandfather's workshop. It sat at the edge of my parents' property, a salt-bleached cedar shake building overlooking the bay. Inside, it smelled of pine shavings, varnish, and history. My grandfather, a man who spoke more with his hands than his mouth, was a master boat builder. Not yachts, but small, elegant wooden skiffs and sailboats, each one a work of art. He was the only one who ever truly understood my artistic temperament. He'd let me sit for hours, just drawing the curve of a hull or the shape of a brass cleat, and he was the only one who saw the same spark in Leo. Before he passed away 2 years ago, He'd spend hours with Leo in that workshop. He didn't care that Leo didn't make eye contact. He saw the way Leo's small hands would trace the grain of a piece of oak. He saw the boy's intense, unblinking focus. He saw a successor. I know he did. He once told me, his voice raspy with age, "That boy, he doesn't just see the wood, Elara. He listens to it." After he died, the workshop sat dormant, a silent monument. I'd take Leo there sometimes, and we'd just sit, breathing in the quiet legacy. Leo would run his hands over the tools, neatly hung on the pegboard walls. The lathes, the planers, the wall of hand-carved chisels, each one with a worn, smooth handle that fit perfectly in your palm. He'd touch them with a reverence that bordered on worship. In his mind, this place was his future. It was his sanctuary. It was the only place in the world, besides our tiny cottage, where he felt completely, utterly himself. He had notebooks filled with his own designs, modifications on Grandpa's old sketches. He dreamed of building a boat. Just one, based on the last unfinished blueprint tacked to the wall. He talked about it constantly. It was his everything, which is why, when my parents called a family meeting last month, I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. They never called meetings. They just let things happen. We all gathered in their sterile, perfectly kept living room. Me, Leo, Marcus, and his family. Chloe was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car. My dad cleared his throat, looking serious and important. "As you know," he began, "your mother and I have been thinking about the future, about managing assets responsibly." I felt Leo stiffen beside me. He knew where this was going long before I did. "The workshop," my mom said, smiling a practiced, gentle smile. "It's a wonderful piece of family history, but it's also a significant property. It requires upkeep, taxes, insurance." Marcus nodded sagely, sipping his water. "It's an underutilized asset," he said, and the word asset felt like a profanity in that context. My dad continued, "So we've decided the most practical course of action is to transfer the deed to Marcus." He looked at his son with pure, undiluted pride. "He has the financial acumen to manage it properly. He's talking about either leasing it out to a local artisan, or perhaps, down the line, developing the property. It's a great opportunity for him and his family." The air left my lungs. I looked at Leo. His face was a pale, still mask. He was staring at his hands, which were clenched into white-knuckled fists in his lap. He didn't make a sound. He just retreated, went somewhere deep inside himself, where they couldn't reach him. I looked from Leo's frozen face to my brother's smug, satisfied one. "What about Leo?" I whispered. The words felt thin and useless in the heavy silence. My mother's smile tightened. "Oh, Elara, be realistic," she said, her voice laced with that familiar gentle pity she reserved for me. "It's a huge responsibility. There are dangerous tools, financials. It's just not a suitable environment for—" She trailed off, not wanting to say the word. Marcus stepped in. "Look, Elara, we'll make sure Leo can visit any time he wants, as long as I'm there to supervise." "Of course. We're not monsters." He said it like he was offering a grand concession. Supervise. In his own grandfather's workshop. My father added the final killing blow. He looked over at Leo, but not at him, and said, "It's for the best. This way, The legacy is protected for the whole family. And in that moment, I understood. They weren't just giving away a building. They were formally writing my son out of the story. They were declaring him unworthy of his own heritage because he was different, because he wasn't normal, because he wasn't Marcus. The drive home was silent. Not a peaceful silence, but a screaming one. Leo sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the blurry streetlights. He hadn't said a word since my father's announcement. When we got back to our little cottage, he walked straight to his room and closed the door. I didn't hear crying. I heard nothing. That was so much worse. The silence was an accusation. It was the sound of a 14-year-old boy's heart breaking in a way I couldn't fix with a hug or a promise. I stood in the hallway, my hand on his door, and I felt a rage so pure and so cold. It was almost clarifying. For years I had swallowed their slights. For years I had made excuses for them. I remembered Leo's 10th birthday. He had spent a month carving a tiny, intricate chickadee out of a block of pine for my father, who was an avid birdwatcher. He presented it with trembling, hopeful hands. My dad had smiled, said, "Oh, that's nice, Leo," and set it on the mantel behind a framed picture of Marcus's son, Ethan, holding a lacrosse trophy. Later that day, Marcus and Chloe gave Ethan a new drone. The entire family went outside to watch it fly, oohing and aahing, leaving Leo and his little wooden bird forgotten in the living room. I saw him slip the bird into his pocket when no one was looking. He never gave my father another carving. I remembered the summer barbecues where Marcus would try to force a football into Leo's hands, laughing it off when Leo would flinch away from the noise and the chaos. "Lighten up, buddy. You gotta learn to be a boy," he'd say, clapping him on the back too hard. Chloe would follow up with her saccharine smile. "Don't worry, Alara. He'll grow out of it." My cousin's son had sensory issues, and they found this wonderful camp. They always talked about him like he was a project, a car with a faulty engine. Something to be fixed, not a person to be known. And my parents, their neglect was quieter, softer, somehow more wounding. They'd praise his cousin Ethan for getting an A in history, but when I'd show them one of Leo's stunningly detailed drawings, a cutaway of a schooner that was worthy of a museum, they'd say, "That's very focused. Is his social skills class going well?" They loved him, I think, in the abstract way you love a concept. They loved the idea of being good grandparents to a special needs child. But they didn't know how to love the child himself. They didn't know how to enter his world. They just kept trying to drag him into theirs, a world where he would always be less than. That night, after the family meeting, I sat at my kitchen table until 2 a.m., the rage slowly cooling, hardening into a plan. They had taken the shell, the property, the asset. They had left the soul behind because they didn't even recognize it as valuable. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about him showing a 7-year-old Leo how to hold a chisel, his big calloused hand covering my son's. I thought about the promise in his eyes. He wasn't just passing on a skill. He was passing on a purpose. My family had desecrated that. They had valued Marcus's 401k over my grandfather's dying wish, and my son's entire world. I wouldn't fight them for the building. I didn't have the money or the energy for a legal battle that I would surely lose. But legacy. Legacy wasn't about deeds and property taxes. I put on my dark coat, found the spare key to the workshop that my grandfather had given me years ago. For the dreamers, he'd winked, and I walked out into the cold, salt-laced night. The walk to my parents' house was short. The workshop stood dark and silent against the starry sky. I let myself in. The familiar smell hit me. Sawdust and varnish and something else. Potential. Grief. I didn't turn on the lights. I knew my way by heart. I walked past the saws and the lathes. I ignored the neatly organized tools on the wall. I went to the back corner, to my grandfather's old drafting table. And there they were. In a long leather tube, tucked away on a shelf, were his original hand-drawn blueprints. Dozens of them. Rolled up scrolls of aging high-quality paper. The designs for every single boat he had ever built, from the first leaky rowboat to his final perfect masterpiece, the Elara. Each one was a symphony of graphite lines, precise measurements, and scribbled notes in his familiar, spidery handwriting. These weren't just plans. They were his thoughts, his soul, his genius committed to paper. They were the workshop's heart. Without them, the building was just an old shed full of tools. With them, it was a cathedral. I carefully slid the leather tube into a long portfolio bag I had brought. I took one last look around the silent workshop. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective righteousness. They could have the building. They could have the asset. They could have the empty shell. I was taking the magic. I was taking the history. I was taking the legacy. I let myself out, locked the door behind me, and walked back home under the silent, watching stars, carrying my son's birthright. The first sign of the fallout came 3 days later. It was a text from Marcos. "Hey, weird question. I was at the workshop and I can't find Grandpa's old blueprints. You know, the ones in the leather tube. Have you seen them?" I stared at my phone, a slow cold smile spreading across my face. I let the message sit for a full hour before replying. No idea, maybe Dad moved them for safekeeping. It was a lie, but it was a beautiful, calculated one. I was planting a seed. Another day passed. Then my phone rang. It was Marcos again. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was tight, annoyed. "Elara, call me. I've turned that workshop upside down. Mom and Dad swear they haven't touched them. This isn't funny. I have a guy from a Maritime Historical Society coming next week to appraise the collection. The plans are the most valuable part. Where are they?" Collection. Appraise. The words confirmed everything I already knew. To him, it was just a portfolio of assets to be liquidated or leveraged. I didn't call back. That evening, my mom called. I answered. Her voice was flustered. "Elara, honey. Marcus is in a state. He can't find the blueprints. Did you happen to borrow them for one of your art projects?" The condescension was still there, even in her panic. The idea that I would borrow them for a little hobby. "No, Mom. I haven't been to the workshop in weeks," I said, my voice as calm as a summer lake. "Maybe they got misplaced during cleaning." "No one's cleaned in there for 2 years," she snapped, then caught herself. "Well, just, if you think of anything, let us know. It's very important." I hung up and went to check on Leo. The door to his room was ajar. He was at his desk, hunched over one of my grandfather's blueprints, which I had carefully unrolled and weighted down. It was the plan for a small, single-mast sailboat called the Starlight. He had a piece of tracing paper over it and was meticulously copying a section of the hull, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was humming, a low, steady sound he makes when he's completely absorbed. When he's happy. He looked up as I entered, and for the first time in days, his eyes were clear. The storm had passed. "The keel design is genius," he said, his voice full of awe. "He distributed the weight in a way I've never seen. It's counterintuitive, but it would be incredibly stable in a crosswind." He wasn't just looking at lines on paper. He was having a conversation with his great-grandfather across time. I felt a wave of love for him so powerful it almost buckled my knees. This was why I'd done it. Not for revenge. Not to be petty. For this. For this exact moment. To give him back the part of his grandfather they had tried to steal. To show him that his passion was not a silly hobby, but a direct connection to the best parts of our family. That night I made a decision. I took the small savings I had, the money I'd been setting aside for a down payment on a house one day, and I rented a small dusty garage space down by the marina. It wasn't the beautiful, history-soaked workshop on the hill, but it was ours. The next day, Leo and I started moving my grandfather's legacy, one rolled-up blueprint at a time, into its new home. We were going to build a boat. The full confrontation came a week later. A black Mercedes pulled into the gravel driveway of my rented cottage. Marcus got out, his face a thundercloud. He didn't knock. He hammered on the door. I opened it and stood there, blocking the entrance. "Where are they, Elara?" he demanded. No preamble. "I know you have them." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my voice betraying nothing. His face got red. "Don't play dumb with me. The appraiser came today. He said the tools and the building are worth something, sure, but the provenance, the legacy, is in those original plans. Without them, it's just a nice old shed. He said they're culturally significant. Do you know how much that affects the valuation?" And there it was. Valuation. Not history. Not art. Not soul. Valuation. "Oh," I said, feigning surprise. "That's a shame. So it's not as good of an asset as you thought." That's when he lost it. "This isn't a game. Dad gave me that workshop. It's mine. Those blueprints are part of it. That's theft. I could call the police." "Go ahead," I said, my voice dropping, the ice finally breaking. "Call them, and the local paper. Tell them the story. Tell them how you took your autistic nephew's dream away from him to pad your portfolio. Tell them how you see your grandfather's life's work as a valuation. Tell them everything, Marcus. Let's see who looks like the thief." He stared at me, speechless. He had never seen me like this. I wasn't the sensitive pushover artist anymore. I was a mother protecting her child, and that was a force he had never reckoned with. He saw I wasn't bluffing. He saw I had nothing left to lose. "Why are you doing this?" he finally stammered, his anger deflating into confusion. "This is about more than the workshop, isn't it? This was never about the workshop," I said, my voice hard and clear. "This is about a boy you have never once tried to understand. This is about a family that measures worth in dollars and normality. You took his sanctuary, Marcus. You stood there and watched Dad and Mom tell my son he wasn't worthy of his own grandfather's legacy. You wanted the asset, so you can have it. Enjoy the empty building. The soul of that place is with us now, It's in a dusty garage where we're going to honor Grandpa's memory, not appraise it. I looked him dead in the eye. Now get off my property. He stood there for a long moment, his jaw working. Then, without another word, he turned, got back in his expensive car, and drove away. As his car disappeared, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. The final tie had been cut. The war was over because I had simply refused to fight on their terms any longer. The silence that followed was profound. No more texts. No more calls. It was like a switch had been flipped. My family, for the first time in my life, had nothing to say to me. The family group chat, once a constant stream of Chloe's vacation photos and Marcus's humble brags, went dead. I imagined the conversations were now happening without me. Frantic phone calls and hushed, angry meetings. I was no longer the difficult sister. I was the villain, the thief, the one who had finally gone too far. And I found, to my own surprise, that I didn't care. The peace was intoxicating. Our little cottage felt lighter. Our evenings weren't tinged with the anxiety of an impending family event where I'd have to run interference for Leo, translating his beautiful, literal world for people who refused to learn the language. Leo blossomed in the quiet. He was a different kid, without the constant low-level hum of judgment from our family. He started talking more, initiating conversations about the boat plans, about the type of wood we'd need, about the physics of sailing. He'd look me in the eye and smile, a real, unguarded smile. Our life found a new rhythm, centered around the garage. It was grimy and cold, but we made it our own. We hung strings of work lights. We set up a second-hand workbench. We spent weekends unrolling the precious blueprints, studying them, deciphering our grandfather's notes. I handled the budget, finding affordable suppliers for lumber and epoxy. Leo was the master designer, the keeper of the vision. He created a meticulous, color-coded project plan. He built scale models out of cardboard and balsa wood. He was in his element, focused and brilliant. He was happy. Truly, deeply happy. The consequences of my actions rippled out in ways I hadn't expected. About a month after my confrontation with Marcus, I ran into an old family friend, Mr. Abernathy, at the grocery store. He was a sailor and had been one of my grandfather's closest confidants. He gave me a sad, knowing look. "Elara," he said, his voice gentle. "I heard about the workshop. A real shame." I braced myself for a lecture. "Marcus called me," he continued, shaking his head. "Wanted me to help him find a buyer for some of the old tools. Said he was clearing the place out. He mentioned the blueprints were missing." He paused, looking at me intently. "Your grandfather always said that workshop was for Leo. He said the boy had the gift, the listening hands, he called it." My eyes filled with tears. "He did?" "He did," Mr. Abernathy confirmed. "Your grandfather wasn't a man who cared about legal papers. He cared about spirit. I hope those blueprints are somewhere safe, somewhere they'll be respected." He squeezed my arm. "You're a good mother, Elara." I walked out of that store feeling 10 feet tall. It wasn't just my own righteous anger anymore. It was a confirmation. I hadn't stolen anything. I had carried out a will that was never written down. The other shoe dropped a few weeks later. My parents showed up at my door unannounced. It was the first time I'd seen them since the meeting. My father looked uncomfortable, My mother looked wounded, a master of weaponized disappointment. "We need to talk," my father said, trying to push past me into the house. I stood my ground. "We can talk right here," I said. My mother started, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Elara, how could you? Your brother is devastated. You've torn this family apart, all because you couldn't accept a simple, practical decision." "Practical for who, Mom?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Was it practical for Leo? Did you ever, for 1 second, think about what you were taking from him? Or were you too busy admiring Marcus's portfolio?" "That's not fair," she cried. "We love Leo, but we have to be realistic. Marcus is successful. He can provide a future. What can you give him? An art career? A dusty garage?" "I can give him respect," I shot back, the words like stones. "I can give him a world where he is not seen as a liability. I can see his genius instead of his diagnosis. I can listen to him. You say you love him, but you don't even know him. You haven't taken the time. You love the idea of him, but the real, living, breathing, brilliant boy is an inconvenience to you. Because he's not like Marcus. He's not like you. He's your grandson," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "And you gave away his heart and soul because it wasn't a good investment. You chose money over your own family. So don't you dare come here and talk to me about tearing things apart. You broke this family. I just stopped pretending it was still whole." I watched the anger and righteousness drain from their faces, replaced by a flicker of something else. Shock? Guilt? I couldn't be sure. But for the first time they were speechless. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it gently, turned the lock and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The house behind me was silent, except for the faint, happy humming coming from Leo's room. I've learned that legacy isn't a thing you're given. It's not a building or a bank account. It's a flame. It's a spark of passion and knowledge passed from one hand to the next. For years, my family tried to shelter that flame in a place where there was no air, where it would have eventually suffocated and died. They thought protecting it meant locking it away, putting it under the care of the responsible one. They didn't understand that a flame like that doesn't need a guardian. It needs a bellows. It needs fuel. It needs someone who isn't afraid to get burned. My son has taught me that. The world looks at Leo and sees the things he can't do. They see the awkward social cues, the lack of eye contact, the resistance to change. They see a list of symptoms. I see a boy with a mind so focused, so pure in its pursuit of understanding, that it leaves no room for the pettiness that consumes the rest of us. His disability is a filter. It filters out the noise, the social static, the need for approval. It leaves only the essential, the grain of the wood, the curve of the hull, the truth of the design. My family saw his autism as a weakness that made him unworthy of his legacy. I have come to see it as the very thing that makes him its only true heir. We're not just building a boat in that garage. We're building a new life. A life where worth isn't determined by a bank statement or a report card, but by the passion in your heart and the skill in your hands. A life where being different isn't a deficit, but a superpower. I'm not the parent I thought I would be. I thought being a good mother meant protecting my child from the world. I've learned it often means protecting him from his own family. It means recognizing that sometimes the people who are supposed to be your safe harbor are actually the storm. And sometimes the only way to save your crew is to cut the anchor and sail away on your own. I don't know what will become of the workshop on the hill. I hear through town gossip that Marcus is having trouble selling it. Without the blueprints, without the story, it's just a liability. I feel a flicker of grim satisfaction at that, but it passes quickly. It doesn't matter anymore. His world, his problems, they are no longer my concern. My world is here, in this dusty garage that smells of fresh-cut cedar and hope. It's in the quiet companionship of my son, a boy who is finally free to be exactly who he is. We may never be rich. We may never be successful by my family's standards, but we are building something real, something beautiful, something that will carry us, and it will be ours. So I'll ask you, when a legacy is at stake, who has the greater claim? The one who inherits the property, or the one who inherits the purpose? I think I know the answer. And every time I watch my son's hands move with confident grace over a piece of wood his great-grandfather might have touched, I know I made the right choice. What do you think? Did I steal from my family, or did I rescue my son's soul? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing. I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our voyage.